Well, at ease, paratroopers, and welcome back to the Enduring Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Kidder. I am so excited for today's episode. It is one of the most honest, intentional, and insightful conversations I've had this season. Today's guest is Kate McDermott, a former Navy Reserve nurse, hospice nurse, wife, and mother. And this is not your typical military story. Kate opens up about what it means to serve quietly, to wrestle with identity, and to carry purpose forward without medals, deployments, or public recognition. We talk about grief, resilience, leadership, marriage as a team sport, and the tension many veterans and caregivers feel when they ask themselves, do I even count? If you've ever served in a way that didn't come with spotlight, or if you're navigating seasons of transition, family, purpose, whatever, please listen, and especially the last 15 minutes or so. There's some incredible wisdom shared. Here's my conversation with Kate McDermott. Let's dive in. All right, Miss Kate, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are one of my most exciting guests because we don't know each other that well, but you've always struck me as a very intelligent, well-spoken, articulate person who lives life the way it should be. You and I met, I'd say 3 years ago. I came out to Arizona for Memorial Day, and Caitlin's mom was hosting it, and you came, and Caitlin said you were in the Navy, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And since then, we've celebrated Caitlin's birthday. We've had social gatherings together, and every time we get to hang out, I just learn more about you as a person and as a mom and a wife. And I thoroughly enjoy who you are.
Oh, well, that is very kind of you to say. I feel the same.
Well, thank you. As many of the listeners know, and you're about to experience, back in April, I attended a conference in Los Angeles. And during the conference, I met Brett Ledbetter, who is a mental performance coach. And he was teaching a breakout session on the art of asking better questions. And at the end, he got to plug his new book, which was 365 Questions to Get to Know Yourself and Your Team Better. And I knew once I started the podcast, I wanted to take his idea and make it my own. So anytime I have a guest, I have someone pick a question between 1 and 365. We read that question on air for the first time to get a real authentic answer. Most of his questions are 2 parts, and yours is no different. Are you ready for yours?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. When was the last time you felt an overwhelming sense of shock just wash over you?
Of shock just washed over me.
Yeah.
Well, oh goodness, I feel like you're going to you're starting me. I'm starting off with like a heavy hitting
Right.
serious answer. Um, my dad passed away 2.5 years ago. And I think while the moments leading up to it, he had a long hospitalization right before, leading up to when he eventually passed. And my being in the medical field, like I kind of saw the writing on the wall for a while. Um, that like the actual moment, the finality of that moment, and I've working in the emergency room and stuff. I've been with a lot of families as they've come to those moments as well in the emergency room and in my work in hospice nursing. So you think you know what it's going to be like, but it's just very different to walk through it yourself. And I think the finality of it um, was shocking in a way. And I think, and then the little moments since then that catch you. When I think of like true shock, it's not necessarily like the shock and awe of something surprising, but more just the shock of like it kind of catching your breath and having to reorient yourself from that. It's something that takes you out of like the moment that you're living in and makes you just pause. So I'd say both that big time when it actually happened, and then just a couple of the times, when I'm doing something in my day, and I have to remind myself that, oh, I can't actually just call my dad or something, and that kind of like just knocks the air out of you.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing that with us. It's very personal. What
Yeah,
would
I know.
you
It's
say is
like
the
I'm
best
sorry, I'm going to jump
lesson?
right into like life and death on my first answer.
No, you know what I've learned is Brett doesn't hold back with questions. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is going to be a softball." I'm like, no, we're probably going to start off a little rough. So I apologize.
No, you're
Um,
fine.
what would you say is the best lesson you learned from that feeling of shock just washing over you?
Um, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but to to just embrace it. That shock is usually an emotion that you feel um, when you kind of need a little jumpstart into something. And I've always said, and as I said, as I work with families who've gone through grief,
Mhm.
and my work in nursing, I always say that you don't grow away from your grief; it just grows around you. And
Absolutely.
so, just embracing whatever emotion that brings to you, the shock in the moment, that if none of it's bad, it's all part of the process. And just to kind of keep add that to your backpack, if you will, and just keep moving forward with that. Um, is, I guess, the lesson that I've learned from those moments.
That's fantastic. I love it. You have to embrace it, right? Where we can be so adverse to not acknowledging or experiencing emotions, especially ones that are more on the negative scale. But um, it, like you said, it's a process, and if you let it envelop you and grow with you, you can grow as a human. On the other side, you are a Spartan race finisher. What was that like?
Yeah. Maybe that I should have said that's my more recent shock moment, is that I actually did that. Um, Now, not one to like try to downplay anything. I mean, I wasn't this major athletic feat. I didn't set any records except for personal ones. But yes, I just completed a Spartan race a few days ago. I still have the bruises and soreness to show for that. It was a goal I set back in January. I kind of hit like a year postpartum after having my son, and was just needing to do something to get my butt in gear. And so I said I was going to do it, and I started working out with the trainer. So yeah, I just completed it. I checked that box. So I feel good about it. It's good to have a very tangible goal, and to meet it. So
A
I guess it feels good.
absolutely, yeah, I've never done one, that's fantastic, my best friend did a Spartan race several years ago, anything that gets your body moving, and that's gonna be fantastic, but you set a goal and you accomplished it, and there's no such thing as just, so I'm glad you did it, and I remember the smile on your face seeing you in the evening, at the dinner party, I was like, "Yeah, you should be happy, you guys look great."
Thank you. I don't know if it was a smile of accomplishment, or just like sheer just being tired and whiplash, because I finished the Spartan race and then came right home to my two kids, and they thought the medal was cool, and then they were just ready to jump into coloring and what's for dinner. And then we quickly put them to bed, and I saw you that evening for our friends' housewarming party. So I think I was just, as I said, a little bit of a mental whiplash from it all, but it did feel good.
Oh, yeah, no rest for the weary, right?
No.
All right, so let's get into you a little bit. What was life like growing up? Where are you from? What were the big influences that shaped you early on?
Well, so I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I met your lovely wife, Caitlin. And I'm a Phoenix native. I always like to say that because I feel like there's not that many of us.
Hmm.
Um, Arizona is a land of transplants, or at least it used to be. It's getting, I guess, away from that. But anyways, born and raised here in Phoenix. Never really thought that I would still be here. I always thought at every, big transition point I would leave and do something else, but I have just kept finding reasons to stay. So yeah, born and raised in Phoenix. I have, my two parents. They were married 36 years when my dad passed.
Oh, congrats.
I know, 36 years. I have a brother and a sister. They are much older than I am. My dad was actually married once before, so they're technically my half brother and sister. And I only say that as a way to, when I explained that we have a little bit of an age gap. So, um, my sister's 13 years older than I am, and my brother's 10 years older than I am. But I was going to say, I think that's important to note, because I think that they having um, that age gap really provided me with a lot of framework and influence growing up. And think, I looked to my sister who was very successful. And she kind of, being 13 years ahead of me, I got to really see the roadmap that she laid out and try to follow that, as far as, how to achieve a successful education and schooling and things like that. But yeah, very just simple, close knit family, really small family. I actually didn't have any first cousins growing up. Um, and all that. So we're just a really close family unit, I guess is what I would say.
Oh, I like that, and I understand the distinction. I have 2 half brothers. I call my brothers, they call me their brothers, but I'm 7 and 8 years older than them, so that does help. People kinda give you that look. You're like, "Okay, well, this is
Yeah.
why there's a little bit of an age gap."
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. And I mean, my brother and sister, Laura and Paul, we've never ever referred to anything other than just brother and sister. But as I
right.
said, the age gap has actually when you talk about how I grew up and the influences that I had. I think having those significantly older siblings really did impact just kind of who I looked up to. You have those immediate references just in your household, um, and that's really shaped, as I said, who I am.
And I get that. It explains a little bit more about your demeanor, your personality, because you and your husband and your kids, you have that vibe about you, just that very core nuclear family feeling that is so absent across our society right now. When you look back, were there any early signs that maybe you were going to pursue a life of service, whether in uniform or in medicine?
Um, so funny you should ask. If you would I don't think I ever would have thought when I was in my younger years, elementary, junior high, high school, I never would have mentioned nursing. And I never would have mentioned military service. It is all stuff that came later in life when I was in college, actually. Um, but then looking back, hindsight, you start seeing things that made sense. I think I've generally been a acts of service type of person. If you look at, the love languages, both, obviously in romantic relationships, but mostly just in relationships with people I care about. I always had more of the caretaking role within my family, even being the younger sibling. I just always had that. So I guess looking back, it's not shocking to anybody that I became a nurse. Though, if you had told me then, it was never anything that I listed as something I wanted to be when I grew up, if you will. Um, and then the same with the military service. It was after I started exploring joining the Navy that I realized how much of it was in my family. Um, my dad is actually retired from the Coast Guard. He went to the Coast Guard Academy. My grandfather was retired from the Coast Guard, and my grandmother was a Navy nurse. So I actually had a lot in my family. Both my grandparents my dad's side had passed away before I was born, so it wasn't anything. There wasn't like a daily influence in that sense, but it was kind of
Mm.
in my family. Um, but the actual like decision to become a nurse and join the military was one that honestly surprised myself when I decided when I had it when it perked my interest, um, if you will.
Oh, I love that. And kudos to your family. Lines of service. I love that. And man, the Coast Guard's so underrated. International waters, keeping I think there's a great movie called The Guardian with Kevin Costner,
Uh-huh.
and they talk about the Coast Guard. It's one of my favorite movies. There's so many leadership lessons in there, but there's a scene they get into a bar fight with a bunch of Navy dudes. They're calling the Coast Guard puddle pirates, and Kevin Costner explains, the Navy's combat oriented, but as rescue swimmers, that's what they are in the movie. They're out there all the time, putting their lives on the line, and just that kind of service before recognition. So just kudos to you and your family. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, as I said, looking back on it, like I talked to a lot of people who become nurses. And even though, as I said, as I keep saying, it kind of caught me by surprise that I chose that path. I actually started in college as a journalism major. So a complete 180. Um, but when you look back on it, or I talk to other friends who are nurses, like nursing tends to run in family lines. People
Mhm.
people who are nurses tend to have an aunt or a mom or a grandma or multiple people in their lives who've been nurses. And the same with military, right? And I think that's just because there have to be some inherent like personality traits in people who want to do that. So it's not surprising that it came like that. It just, as I said, it took me by surprise when I just had this kind of voice in my head that was, um, it was just kind of this little voice in the back of my head that was like, "What about nursing? What about this?" And then I just decided to listen to it honestly on a whim. And thank goodness I did, because it led me, to this whole career and everything like that. And the same with the military.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. What originally led you to join the Navy? What did that decision mean to you at the time? And when you look back, what does it mean now?
Well, so my first like just experience with the idea at all came when I just switched to my major to nursing. I went to Arizona State. And the nursing program there is very competitive. As I said, I started at ASU not planning to be a nurse. I was a journalism major. And then my father actually got sick and had an extended hospital stay over Christmas break of my freshman year of college, and being in the ICU with him and watching how the nurses did their work. That's all of a sudden I was like, you know what? That this I think is what, like, something about this just calls to me. It makes sense, and as I said, on a whim, just decided to pursue that feeling, that kind of gut feeling about it. And then within that, the nursing program was really competitive to get into. So I was actually approached by ASU has an Army ROTC program. um,
Hmm.
they they tried to recruit me, and entice me by saying that I could get kind of fast tracked into the nursing program because they designate a certain number of spots for their nursing students. And so I like talked with the army people, did all of that. Decided that wasn't a route that I was ready to commit to at that time. Um, Ended up, just going through the program on my own. Um, and then once I graduated, about 2 years afterwards, I guess maybe a year afterwards, I just had this again, like just this feeling like service was intriguing to me. I was learning more about what was in my family with it, with my grandmother having been a nurse in the Navy. I always had this great appreciation for the service. So I just decided to pursue it on my own. Once I was after my first year of nursing, I just met with a recruiter actually on my own. I sought them out, and just started the process from there. I joke it was my ploy to
Oh,
become
wow.
my dad's favorite daughter to be the only one to join the military, but that's not really it. Though he was very
Maybe
proud about it.
subconsciously.
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, what did you do in the Navy?
So I was a nurse in the Navy Reserves. I was in for 8 years. Um, I was um, I was coded, as an ER trauma nurse in the Navy. But most of my work was obviously spent being a reservist. I was based out of a unit that was attached to Luke Air Force Base, being here in Phoenix. That's where my reserve station was. So we did, on a day to day basis on our drill weekends, we did all of the physicals and everything like that to make sure all of the other reservists were ready for um, any of their deployments, special trainings, things like that. And then I was attached to the Naval Hospital in San Diego, the Naval Hospital in Bremerton, and Portsmouth, Virginia over my time. And so I did some active stints there, backfilling for um, active duty nurses who had left, worked in their positions in the hospitals while they were gone on overseas work or things like that.
Oh, wow. And that answer is incredible. And it's going to drive the next question. Back when I was starting the podcast, you were one of the first people I reached out to because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, well, Caitlin knows Kate, and she was in the Navy. And that's at least one person who I could probably have a conversation with. And during our initial dialogue, you were open with me, almost struggling to call yourself a veteran, but here you are. You did 8 years. You were all over the country doing these incredible things, um, and you were kind of hung up on the fact that you didn't deploy, which you wear the uniform. You wrote that check up to and including the price of your life. That's no one can take that away from you. So I've seen that with people who were in the National Guard or reserves, and then more frequently with women having and almost putting that identifier on. Can you maybe talk us through that tension in your own words?
Yeah. So I think at the root of it, it comes back to my Navy career did not go the way that I envisioned it when I
Hmm.
first signed up. Granted, when I first, commissioned, I was 23. I was newly 23. Um, so I, had a whole different perspective of what I thought I wanted. I was 23. I was single. I'd been a nurse for a year and a half. All those things. Um, so I had these grand ideas of all the things that I wanted to do, or what I thought would make, what I thought would constitute quote unquote good service, including deploying. And, you have this label. I'm an ER trauma nurse in the military, and these things like that. Um, and for various reasons, timing of it all, what was happening in the world, um, in the time that I commissioned, a lot of they were scaling back um, a
Yeah.
lot of the major military like combative presence in Afghanistan and all that stuff. So they weren't needing ER trauma nurses in the same way. So while I did jobs filling in the hospitals in that route, I had actually been on several voluntary deployment lists. I kept asking to deploy. I kept trying to do other things. I kept being told that, my designation in the Navy was 120% manned. Um, that there's all these desperate pleas for psych nurses and OR nurses and things like that. And that just wasn't me. And so I think for a long time, I struggled with kind of reconciling what I went into the military thinking it would be, which was probably largely inaccurate and an overly romanticized view of it, with the reality of what it was. Um, and when I left the Navy, it was after 8 years, I had my first child. I was married, life looked a lot different. And it was kind of this discussion I had with myself and my husband about, okay, in order to keep moving up the ranks, I'm going to need to do these things to be
Hmm.
promoted. I need to do these things, deployments are their things. And I keep fighting for it. I keep volunteering for it. I keep being told that they don't need it right now or things like that. So how much am I going to um, force myself or plead my case to let me serve them when maybe I
Right.
should just focus on my new role and what I've grown into in my personal life. I had some different job opportunities. And I was getting my master's degree at the time. As I said, I just had my first child. So I think that's where I struggled is it's just my career was not what I thought it was going to be. And it's easy to put the label of, well, I didn't deploy because that's an obvious like identifying thing I can put on it. Um, to that. So I guess that was a little bit of a rambling thing, but I think that's where a lot of that tension or that internal discourse that I have with that the label of veteran comes from.
Okay. No, that makes total sense. I mean, Navy, if anybody's from the Navy is listening, you guys messed up big time, but I know your husband, kids, and your social circle are glad because you're a joy to be around, and you just light up the room and make everybody feel better when you're there.
Well, thank
Um,
you. And I should say I wasn't told anything. It wasn't that I had any personal, issues with like it was no like I got bad review, I anything like that. They
right.
were just like, we don't really need your role in this way as much, but we would like you. It kind of started to feel like if you think about the idea of service and what you and I have talked about and a call, a sense of service, I started wondering like, okay, I'm in it for the sense of service, but at some point I have to also feel like I'm getting something back. And right now I feel like
Hmm.
I'm kind of pleading my case that they should want me to do more. And it's just not working out that way. Um, and so I think that that's, as I said, that's where it came from. And then just not to completely offshoot, I think my husband and I are actually talking about this over the weekend. I think I struggle with the idea of a veteran being a medical professional because to me, there's just such a difference between the 18-year-olds who are going out there and like truly, truly risking their lives and putting themselves in situations in combat situations or things like that, um, versus a medical role. And I don't mean to downplay that. I know I have a very important skill in those scenarios. Um, but to me, there is a difference. And so I think that's something that I just am always conscious of.
No, I totally understand that, and I mean, we could debate this from a philosophical standpoint for hours. But I just signed my publisher. The book's coming out. And it's called The Invisible Veteran, and the idea is to bring help veterans reclaim their purpose, identity, and connection after service. Did you struggle with any of that once you decided to take the uniform off and kind of leave that part of you behind?
Struggle with identifying as having been in the military.
Yeah, like transitioning from the military or, your identity or your purpose?
Well, I think I've struggled with it in the ways kind of to elaborate, on the stuff that you always tell me and how you're you're always amazing and so kind and always wish me a happy Veterans Day and all that stuff. I think it truly is just an issue I struggle with identity. It's not my service is nothing that I am by any means uh not embarrassed by. There's no shame to it. There's no guilt associated with it. I think. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people when they hear that you're in the Navy, then the immediate follow up questions are like, "Oh, where did you deploy? Where were you stationed? Where
Mhm.
was your active duty service?" And I always feel a little bit like I'm misrepresenting myself in that kind of just saying like, "Oh yeah, I was in the Navy," because I don't have what people expect to be the normal answers after that. And I think that's just a general like lack of knowledge on the layman's terms of what all goes into, where the military is and how
Yeah.
and how they work and function and all the different areas where they need support. But I think I just shy away from even mentioning that I was in it because I don't have the answers that I thought I would have to those questions um, when I mentioned that I was in the military.
Yeah, that's such a great insight. It's almost the inverse of what I do, where I my whole identity was wrapped up in it, and when it was taken away from me, I had no idea who I
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Uh, so what skills or mindsets or perspectives did you learn, from the Navy that you still carry with you today?
I think the best lesson, like the best thing that the Navy gave me and taught me was how to exist and lead um, in any room. I
Mhm.
think, as I said, I commissioned. I was an officer at 23. Um, and I know there's no video to this, but I am a smaller frame person. I know I have a slightly higher pitched voice, and I'm this 23-year-old coming into to a scenario, and people are saluting me and calling me, referring to me by ma'am and my rank and all that stuff. And I definitely struggled with um, how do I command myself, how do I present myself in a way that um, shows that leadership position and kind of commands that respect while also acknowledging the experience and the qualities of all the other people. I had Navy chiefs who had been in 20 years already who were referring to me
Mhm.
as ma'am and saluting me and all those things. And so figuring out how to have appreciate the skill and the role and the rank that I had while also showing respect from a position of authority to everybody else who I was working with is definitely a skill that then helped me throughout my 20s as I pursued other things in my civilian life, in my profession, in my civilian life, and just life in general. I think is probably the best thing that I got from that.
That's fantastic. I would have loved to have known you in uniform because I see how you are with people, and for you to acknowledge that as a younger person, being in charge of other people is daunting, but being able to lead with kindness and authenticity and with respect is really an art that's lost in the civilian workplace.
Mhm.
I listen to certain people that are close in my life and the managers or quote unquote leaders that are in charge of them, and just the toxicity that exudes through emails and phone calls. It hurts my heart, to be honest. Um, so knowing that about you now as a nurse, a wife, and mother, where do you see your service mindset show up in your everyday life?
Well, I mean, where's my service mindset? I mean, the easy answer would be nursing is service oriented. So I don't feel like there's much of a difference between like the Navy service, military service in the sense of duty and commitment to something greater than you, or to a greater mission, if you will, in nursing. So that's
Mhm.
really easy for me to draw parallels. In nursing, you're doing work for somebody else. Like nothing in my shift benefits me, on a
Mhm.
core like person level. Nothing in my nursing shift. I mean, I gain a lot of things from my interactions and my experiences and stuff like that. But none of my nursing job is for me. So that's obviously an easy kind of answer for the service mindset of it. Um, I think in my professional life, in my personal life, in my marriage, and my kids, it's the same thing, right? Like you just gotta respect the people that you're with. You can't lead. You can't ask to be a mom by just being a dictator and expect your kids to listen to you. I mean, my kids are little. You could probably speak to that more. I know you're in the teenage years with yours. But life doesn't work by just walking around and shouting demands and thinking the fact that your parent automatically earns you all of the respect and answers that you want. You kind of have to put in the work and put in the time with your kids and with your family and with your friends uh, for that, right?
Oh man, that was dynamite. Look, I was hoping you were gonna say something along those lines. You don't lead anywhere more than you do your own household.
Yeah.
And being a parent is a privilege. And the formative years, up until they leave the house, you will spend 80% of your time with them before they turn 18. And after that, you're not going to spend that much time. They're going to live their own lives, but nothing is owed to you. You chose to have children
Hmm.
most of the time. And I just love that answer. Like you can lead with them, and they're going to model your behavior, the way you talk and interact with them, the, the positive or negative examples you set, it really comes from the household. And I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I struggle. I think about it because I do think at the core, I mean, I don't want to get into a big debate on parenting and be controversial about, styles of parenting and stuff. I mean, I do think at the core, like sometimes I'm like, well, I am your mom and I am older and I know more and I have your safety in mind. So like sometimes the answer just kind of needs to be because I said so, in a few key
Right.
scenarios. But for the most part, they yeah, you just because you I think parenthood and I think a lot of other things in life, you're kind of given this level of authority just by the title that you get, right? Like I'm a mom, so I have this, but you
Hmm.
don't get to keep it because of that. So, you're
Right.
you're given this title and this responsibility and this authority, but you don't get to keep it and maintain it unless you, as you said, show up in those kind of thoughtful leadership ways in your family. It's just not going to go well.
No, it won't. And speaking of, so you and your husband both work in high stress professions and environments. What have you two learned about teamwork along the way? Because you guys are a fantastic couple.
No, thank you. Um, yeah, so Ryan, my husband, for your listeners, he is an ER doctor. Um, we met at work. I should always say it was not this Grey's Anatomy style thing. We were truly just coworkers and friends. We connected after we no longer worked together and just realized we still had a lot in common and eventually started dating. But I think at the core, like our initial 2 years that we even first knew each other was just working in a setting in an ER as a nurse and a doctor together. And that's just, I mean, there just has to be teamwork in order for that to happen. You have to leave egos aside. You have to have a sense of um, a mission, not to keep using terms like that, but, you have to have a greater sense of mission and combined goal. I think that made it easy to translate into then our life as, husband and wife and now parents, that we had that foundation just even working together. And there's a mutual respect. Um, and we also recognize that we both bring different things to the table. Um,
Mm,
and so understanding that we're going to do things a little bit differently, but they generally complement each other. Um, that individually, like I can't do everything I need to do to be a successful wife and mother without the counterbalance of him and what he adds to that. Um, I think is what it is. And then we always like to say, he actually brought it up to me once. He said it, and then it's kind of been something that's stuck in our marriage. Is that like marriage is obviously teamwork, but it's never 50-50. It's sixty
hmm
40, but both people in it have to be working like hell to be the 60. Um,
absolutely.
and so that's something that like we think about um a lot because there are days where I'm just gassed by being because I'm mostly at home with my kids at the moment. So there are days that he'll come home and I'll just be completely spent just from, the rigmarole of being a mom of two littles and everything else. And he'll see that I can't answer one more question or I need some little break and he will swoop right in or vice versa, when he's in a string of shifts and comes home after a hard one. So just kind of acknowledging that and trying to be the 60%, I think, no matter what, is part of it.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love that. And for listeners, when you heard about the Office romance, if you're a drama queen or you're a tea drinker, there was no McDreamy, no McSteamy thing.
No, purely
Just
professional.
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that. Um, and I love that you mentioned it's a team, and 50-50 is easy to say, but really, I mean, 60-40. And some days, like with Caitlin and I, like some days I'm at a 10
Yeah,
and she has to be that 90, or, like it's whoever you're both fighting for whatever 100% is for that day.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I
you're
love
right,
that.
yeah, 60-40 is easy to say, but yeah, there let's be honest, it's usually more like 80-20, and it can swing from day to day
Yeah.
on who's the 80 and who's the 20.
Yeah, absolutely. And those days when you're both hitting 100, because those are the days that stick out when you look back.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think not to be, like, cheesy and relate it back, I mean, I know this podcast is about initially, military and all that stuff, but you do have to have a greater sense of like what is our mission here, what is our goal,
Hmm.
and there's no keeping score, uh because at the end of the day it doesn't actually matter who did what to get you there. It would be very
Right.
easy to get lost in the whole, well, I cleaned this up and I cooked dinner, oh well, I'm out, I worked the shift last night that made this money, there's like you're gonna fail as a marriage, as parents, as just people in life if you keep score like that. So you have to have a greater sense of like what your mission is in the sense of a family and raising our kids. And you kind of got to leave that individual part of it at the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is a team sport, and that's your teammates. The most important decision you'll ever make is who you spend the rest of your life with. And if you're a me monster, if you're worrying about what you're doing versus what they're doing, you're going to drive each other apart. That's such a phenomenal point you just brought up.
Yeah, well, and don't get me
Um,
wrong. In like the newborn days, when I was like getting up with the kids, I definitely there'd be moments that I was very tempted to call out the individual tasks that I did that night, or something like that. But and I'm sure Ryan could say the same thing. So like, don't get me wrong. It is not a perfect science that we have going on over here. But at the end of the day, that is our goal.
oh yeah, absolutely. A couple things Caitlin and I have found. One is it's you and me versus the problem, not me versus you.
Hmm.
And if we can work together and find out what the root problem, that emotion is, most of the time it's me. Um, doing something wrong, but we attack the problem and not each other.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that's been wildly helpful for us.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What are some things that have influenced your outlook on resilience and empathy and purpose?
That have influenced like people or things or events in my life.
Y- Yeah, anything.
Um, Let me think. I resiliency. I and purpose. I think I'm sorry. I'm trying to like think of. I have a lot of like thoughts swirling around in my head on that. I'm just trying to think about
No
something that's not going to
worries.
give you a big rambling answer to it.
I don't mind a rambling answer.
um, Sorry. Can you say that last part again? I know you're going to roll your eyes that I'm treating this like it's a test question. I'm really not. I
No,
want to
not at
be. I
all.
want to give something thoughtful.
Yeah, no, I'm just, what are some, people, places, things, events that
Yeah.
have influenced your outlook on resilience or empathy or purpose?
Yeah. Um. I mean, my job as a nurse, my
Hmm.
and honestly, I know we talked a lot about how I was in nursing first as an ER nurse, and that was my job in the Navy. But to kind of fill in the back end of the last few years of my life, I've been working primarily. I've been working in the hospice setting, um,
Mm,
and so I do hospice nursing now. As I said, I'm mostly home with my kids, just nature of the beast, having two young kids and my husband working the hours that he does. But I still work outside of the home as a hospice nurse during the month, during the week. And I think I draw a lot of purpose from that. I get a lot from that as far as, you have these conversations with people and families at the end of their life and what they're looking back on and the things that they cherish the most or the things that they regret the most. And it's truly an
mhm.
honor and a privilege to be able to have a little window into that. Because,
Yeah.
right, we all wish going through our lives we could have this magic 8 ball of what the right answer in any scenario should be. What should I do about this? And that's just not the way life works. But talking to families who are having those final moments of reflection just really um, has really helped me understand how to be a resilient person, what to fight for, because I think making it through life is picking your battles and deciding what's important to you and trying to stay on the
Mhm.
course of that. And so to have these conversations in these final moments and days with these families and patients um, really draws a lot of that for me. And it's the closest you get to having a to having a what's I can't even think of the term, the crystal ball of what you should do or what the
Right.
future is going to be like, is to be able to kind of experience the reflection of the people that I've been able to care for.
Oh, I love that. And I love how you talked about fighting battles because a lot of life is identifying where you need to put your efforts. One of my favorite movies is The American President. And there's a scene where he's talking to his chief of staff and he's up for reelection and it's politically charged. And um, the president saying you pick the battles or you fight the battles that you can win, and his chief of staff has been his best friend for 30 years. He said, no, you fight the battles that need fighting.
Yeah.
And that's always stuck with me. Like, you don't need to go to war with everybody, but if it's important to you, like you need to be able to dig your heels in and advocate. And I just wonder when, work and family and life all collide,
Hmm.
what what are some of the practices or boundaries or habits that help you stay grounded and focused and, emotionally healthy?
Yeah. It sounds cheesy, but my kids, I think,
Mm,
I think having kids is just this, um, this privilege that just shows you what's important in life and the battles that you pick in it, and you can easily relate everything back to like how is this, because that is, I mean, unequivocally my priority.
mhm.
The heartbeats outside your body, right, when you have kids. And I think I remember my first Thanksgiving after I became a mom, I happened to go to my friend's house because Ryan was working Thanksgiving. So I had this 2-month-old baby with me, and I went to my friend's house to celebrate Thanksgiving. And they were going around the table and talking about what you were thankful for. And then my friend's dad asked, what was the thing that most surprised me about becoming a parent? And I said, how big and how small your life becomes all at once.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
because you have this baby in your arms that has now all of a sudden you are thinking about what is the world that I'm leaving for them look like, what these big battles that you fight to do good by them, and as I said, to make the world better for them and all that stuff. And then but then at the same point, you become so insanely tiny focused on this little person in your life. And so it's this constant battle of like, all I want to do is live in this very like isolated focused world on what's right for Nora, what's right for Henry. But then I also have to think about globally, like, what am I doing and what am I fighting for and showing them in the world um, that they're going to grow up in. And so I think that's where I draw the most purpose from. And I'm okay saying that. I don't think any parent will say saying my kids are where I get my purpose from as a cop out, but I wanted to find something a little
Right.
bit more unique to tell you. Um, but that's what I think is it just makes you think, what do I need to do? Everything comes back to them, both in the grand scale of like, what am I going to work towards in life and in the world and fight for? And then how am I going to just protect you individually?
Oh yeah, I love that. So on that note, what do you hope to model, in strength or vulnerability or tenacity for your kids?
I mean, I think it's just that, right? Like, I think it is just modeling vulnerability. I think it's being open with them. I tell my daughter she'll ask me a question and I'll tell her I don't know a lot. I think it's okay to
Hmm.
show them that you don't know, um, that it's important to, yeah, to acknowledge what you don't know, to be vulnerable in that sense, to acknowledge when it's hard. And I think that that's what shows them resiliency um, and model that for them. Like it's hard. I don't like, it's very, I definitely want to like put on a brave face every time, but I think it's okay to show them like that's, this scared me too, or I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, or this is hard. This is the first time I've ever had to be a parent as well, that sort of thing.
Right.
I don't know that I think it's kind of simple. I don't know. Maybe you'd have a different perspective being a little bit further along in the process, but I think I think it's just that. I think it's just being who you are for your kids and showing them what really happens in life and just like um how you bounce back from that. We Ryan and I talk a lot about what we want to raise our children to be, and I think he first used the word toughness, and I kind of like shied away from that, not because I don't think that that's admirable to be, tough, but it's more we kind of talked about it as a goal for our kids is to raise resilient kids.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a big difference in toughness versus resilience. Um, I think resilience allows for a little bit more humility. Um, and openness while still bouncing back, you know? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, no, you want to be a tennis ball, not an egg. Absolutely.
yeah, so, I want them to be strong and soft at the same point, and I want them I want them to be tough and bounce back from things, but I don't want them to do it at the expense of being reflective or kind or empathetic or things like that. And I think that that's where that to me is resilience versus just being tough. So, and I think we just have to
Uh,
model that for them.
Absolutely. And like if you're a new parent or soon to be parent, go ahead and save this episode. Go to about the 40-minute mark and write this down because this is phenomenal information and guidance and advice. And I absolutely love it. Um,
That's
when
very kind.
you Oh no, I thank you. Thank you for sharing. I knew it's always once we're getting into a good rhythm, that's when people settle in and they really start dropping truth bombs. So this is fantastic. Um, we're in the middle or the start of the holiday season now. When you look at your life today with all its complexity and all the moving parts, what are you most grateful for?
I mean, I just felt like I sound like a broken record. I mean, obviously my family, um,
Hmm.
my health, I think that that is something that I've had to think a lot more about recently. Um,
Yeah.
I think I'm still in denial on the fact that I'm 36. I'm like, things don't move quite the same way. I mean, I know people are gonna roll their eyes and 36 is not old, but in my head, it's like sometimes I still feel like I'm playing a part. Like, who are these kids in my house and they're mine and all that stuff. So it's just kind of coming to the reality that it all just doesn't automatically work. So to be grateful that I have my health, it's easy to get wrapped up in the things that are hard. Um,
Hmm.
it's easy to get wrapped up in the things that are hard, but if you don't have, I really don't want for much when it comes, in
Hmm.
life, in the important things. And that's just, I'm grateful for feeling pretty just content in that, if you will.
Oh, I love that. We just finished a series in church, and it was about gratitude and being content with what
Mhm.
God has provided you. So I love that you just brought that up because that was perfect. A lot of dudes, especially, will say things like, I'll die for my family. But I found a better question is, will you live for them?
Yeah.
Will you stop drinking as much or smoking or doing drugs, or will you get your body to a point where it can be maintained? Because if you let it become a problem now and you ignore it, it's the only thing that's going to be in focus as you age.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband he's kind of obsessive with working out.
Hmm.
I don't mean to say that
Good
negatively.
looking dude, Rye.
If he's listening, if he's listening, I mean, I definitely appreciate the benefits of it, right? But the he's recently, it's been nice to see that change in him. I've known him for 13 years and we've been together for 10 and a half of those. And so it's been so nice. I mean, I knew the potential of the man that I married as far as like who he would be as a parent and his focus. But he's just he has a lot more internal drive than I do. I think, at
Hmm.
least when it comes to physical tasks. He's a lot more disciplined just naturally at his core. Like I'm disciplined by um, necessity that just exists in him. But he has been saying recently that he's doing all of this stuff physically now, not just because to satisfy the little crazy part of his brain that tells him to do it, but because he wants to be able to run after Nora and Henry and keep up with them for sure. Um,
Oh, oh yeah.
yeah. And then to go back to your part you're saying about contentment, I know that I was the first to mention it. I think my dad used to say that the only thing you're entitled to in life is gratitude. Um,
Hmm.
Nothing, you're not entitled to anything else, but you are entitled to feel grateful for things that you work for. And so I do try to remind myself of that. Um, and yeah, I think living a grateful life just lays the foundation for more good things to come.
Oh, I love that. And I have to plug my friend, my life coach and pastor, Pete Wilson here, Northridge Church. He just did a phenomenal sermon on gratitude over the
Hmm.
weekend. So if anybody's looking for a strong message on that, go to YouTube, look up Northridge Church, and it'll be the November 23rd sermon. Pete Wilson,
I'll
phenomenal.
have to look into that for
Um,
sure.
I was sharing it with everybody. I was sending it to my mom, my dad, my friends, my kids. I was like, you have to
Yeah.
watch this. When you zoom out, 20, 30, 40 years from now, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave? Or what does legacy look like for you?
What does legacy look like for me? You have the hard hitting questions. I, I, I mean, my legacy is my children. Um, as I said, I hope I, not, it's kind of, I mean, if we're going to be a little full circle on this episode to go back to my dad, um, he wasn't, I mean, he was a successful man in his life, but he wasn't like this. He obviously did a lot of things. He was the smartest person that I know. Um, just a constant learner, curious. But I have been so, um, sorry, I'm going to get like choked up about this. Um, I've had so many friends that after he passed, like friends from high school and stuff like that, just talk about how Um, they think about him a lot. And these are people that I just
Mm,
went to high school with. And that they think about him as far as being kind and opening their house, like our house to them, and just modeling like this kind of quiet leadership and knowledge, and that he inspired them to pursue things, and to be curious. Um, so I think I hope it, and you get really upset at the circumstances when you have a parent pass, especially when you're young on the younger end of it in your own adult life. You start to uh, get down about all the how awful it is to have lost a parent and all that stuff. But then, I look back and he lived a good life, a full life of,
mm.
you know, he got he had a happy marriage and 3 kids. And he got to see us all like, go out and succeed. And um that's just kind of and he clearly left his mark in a quiet way on so many of my friends. I feel like I'm just rambling here now, but I just hope, like, I don't really care to leave some massive, notable impact that's going to be written about. But
Mhm.
if I can leave something for my children and their friends who come out to just think about and encourage them to be kind people. I just, yeah, maybe that it sounds, God, it sounds so cheesy, but to just kind of leave a legacy of um, of kindness and service. Um, Model for my kids, for them to model for their kids, and all of that.
I mean, look, we're batting 1,000. No one has given me a different answer. Everybody has said it in their own way, but no guest has said, I want my legacy to be my awards or my money or my titles or this or that. Everybody talks about their family, about making sure the closest people to them knew they were loved and they hope they love them well.
Yes.
And I'm just thank you for sharing that. Your dad sounds like an incredible person, and the mark that he left has been phenomenal.
Mm. He was.
When you look at other moms navigating a career, family, their identity, what encouragements would you want to leave with them?
Um, I think I'm gonna completely forget who quoted this because I was it's been a quote that I've heard reiterated, and so I know I'm not gonna quote the original person, so I apologize in advance. But I heard something that really resonated to me because I've struggled a lot with my identity as a mom and a professional, and balancing that. Um, and I heard, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. Um,
Hmm.
and I truly believe that. It took me a little bit of time of sitting with that to see it for a different way and accept it. Um, I can't show up both as the same high achieving professional that I was and be the mom on a day to day basis that I wanted 100%, and vice versa. And that's okay. And it's okay to take kind of a powerful pause on one of those to pursue something else and then circle back to it. Um, I think women and mothers are incredibly resilient. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that it's okay and probably even better and more impactful, to if you need to, take a step back from some role or the other. And it doesn't just mean taking a step back from your professional life in order to pursue a motherhood. It could be the flip. It could be, I really need to
Hmm.
focus on this day-to-day hours of this job to make this successful thing, so I'm going to enlist more help on my home life or something to make it work. So I don't want to seem complete like I'm just saying you need to put your professional goals aside. But I think, yeah, just understanding, yeah, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once, and just keeping that focus.
I love that. And you put it into such a great perspective. And I love how you said a powerful pause, not just a pause, but a powerful. So that shows intentionality. a deliberate thought process on what is best for this season
Hmm.
of my life. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Um, for anyone listening, man, woman, who served or is still serving, but they feel unsure if they count, kind of going back to, um, your uneasiness of being called a veteran. What would you say to someone struggling with that?
Um, I would say, well, all the things that you have told me when I say that. I mean, you at the very core of it signed up to do something that 99% of people don't. And that in itself is worth a lot and says a lot about who you are. Um, and then just on a, so don't let anybody take that away from you. And then on, um, more just kind of logistics part of it, it's you will take stuff from your military career. In my case, leadership at a young age, how to lead in a room at a younger age or stuff like that. You will take things from that service, whatever it was, and apply it to your civilian life that will help you serve people, either your family or your job or anything like that, better. And so the service extends past your military service. And so don't discount any of that.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I hate that the conversation's coming to an end because this has been just an absolute delight and I think a fantastic conversation and a really good insight for viewers, um, who want something a little less typical than, "Oh, I was a dude, I was in the army, I got out and I struggled." Like, you have a very strong, independent, interdependent woman who is, thriving in so many areas of her life. Um, what is something you would tell to a listener who may be struggling with identity, with purpose, or connecting with people?
With in what capacity?
Um, the theme of this season's the invisible veteran, so
Yeah.
maybe leaving service, but really it in whatever capacity, um, you know, that they may be struggling with. It really just kind of you've lived a very full encompassed life. So if someone is struggling with identity in or out of uniform
Hmm.
or as a parent, or with purpose, seeking the purpose, looking for a reason to do a powerful pause,
Yeah.
or even connecting with people because maybe they're more introverted.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Yeah.
anything that comes to mind, what would you say?
I guess I would just say start small. I get like I
Mm.
always feel I struggle with this too. I always think I can plan my way out of any scenario. Um, if I, plan the next 10 steps, I'm going to be able to execute it perfectly, which is just not the case. And so I would just say, just start small, start doing, you just got to start putting one foot in front of the other. So you got to make a smaller scale decision of what do I want today to look like? And then if you string together 7 successful days, then you have a week. And then what do you want this week to look like and next week to look like? And then you have months and then you have years. And so I think starting small of will help you kind of get back to the core of what you want, for yourself in your life. And and then, a lot of days make up a year, right? And so you'll get there. And just don't be overwhelmed um, by trying to figure out the big picture.
I love that. And, the Thanksgiving Day episode, Sergeant Major Ellis, he's the first person who said, "Start small." So you're the second person to say, "Start small." I love that. Kate, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule for sharing your insight and your story with us. It truly means a lot. You're someone I look up to and respect immensely.
Oh, well, thank you. Sounds like a cop out to say right back at you, but I really feel the same way. And I'm so grateful that Caitlin met you and has brought you into our life and we can continue to have these conversations. Um, yeah, it's been really great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
I'll see you soon.
Wow. I love what I do. Kate, Thank you so much for the way you showed up in this conversation. Thoughtful, honest, and grounded. Your perspective is a powerful reminder that leadership doesn't always have to be loud and service doesn't require a spotlight. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me on this episode was contentment, being grateful for health, family, and the life you're building right where you are, being present where your feet are at the moment, um, leading in your home, in your work, in your relationships, doing so with intention, humility, and care. I loved Kate's take on a powerful pause, not stepping back out of fear, but doing so with intention, choosing to focus fully on a role or a season, knowing that purpose isn't lost when you pause, it's refined. Kate, your story showed us that purpose doesn't have to come from chasing more, but rather fully stewarding what we already have. If this conversation resonated with you, especially if you've ever questioned your identity or your impact after service, I hope it encourages you to pause, take inventory, and recognize the quiet ways that you're leading well. If you or someone you know are struggling, please call 988, reach out to a friend, a battle buddy. Make sure the person you reach out to is a fountain, not a drain. And remember, the world is better with you in it. Please give us a like, a share, a follow on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, YouTube at enduring underscore mindset underscore enterprise. And check out our website at www.enduringmindsetenterprise.com. Thanks again for joining me this week. I look forward to sharing another conversation with you next week. I'm your host, Kevin. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.